New Mexico just mandated a form of consideration. It's similar to earnest money, but a little bit different. To hear our thoughts and more, stay tuned to this episode of The Den. The Den, powered by the Lyons Group, where we talk real estate, entrepreneurship, and personal growth. We're a small team of partners sharing what we've learned along the way. Backed by over $500 million in real estate sales and over 2,300 successful transactions. You'll hear from proven experts and industry leaders with a fresh take on what's happening in real estate and beyond. Welcome to The Den. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Den. And today we're going to be talking about consideration and not being considerate. Consideration in the form of a contract. And it's got its own tentacles that we're going to try to peel back and peel away and pull off. And I don't even know what we're going to do with this one. But it has been mandated here in the state of New Mexico. And if you're in New Mexico, it's going to directly affect you if you're buying a property. And if you're not, you may want to pay attention because this may be coming to a state near you. But before I get into that, let me introduce my friends, my partners, my co-hosts, the fellow members of the Lyons Group. To my right, Paul, Hammy the Rockberry, Aspen, the Ninja Gruen, and the boss, Shannon Martin Martinez. And I'm Ben, Mr. Considerate Lyons. I am considerate.
You're very considerate.
Yeah. Well, I think that's been one of the most truthful ones lately, right?
Toot, toot.
Yeah.
That's Ben tooting his own horn over there.
And humble.
Yeah, humble. Mr. Humble Lyons. Consideration. Yeah, we just had some forms change here on the state level. In MAR, New Mexico Association of Realtors, they are the association that we belong to here in New Mexico. And of course, there's the Colorado associations and Arizona associations. Together, we have leadership on the state level that's comprised of realtors. And I know, Aspen, you're in leadership positions. Paul has been there for many years. I've served myself on the state level. Shannon, you've done some stuff on the state level, haven't you? No, you have just you've played local. Mm-hmm. You've played safe, actually.
Don't get into those politics.
Yeah, man, politics is ugly. Coming out of that, though, we've had some big changes. So I'm not going to try to identify all these changes myself. That's why I've got Paul here, because he's the big brain of the operation. Paul, lay down some information on what consideration is and how it can impact a buyer and seller.
Well, what are the three components of a contract?
Well, you have a meeting of the minds.
Well, buyer, seller, and consideration.
Okay.
So consideration is an exchange of either money or goods. So what has been going around in the judicial system lately is, at what point is consideration handed over in a real estate contract? So if you hand over earnest money at the beginning of a contract, and that earnest money is pretty much in limbo until closing, it can either, if the deal terminates, it goes to whomever it's supposed to. If it closes, then it goes towards the purchase price. At what point there is that actually considered consideration? That's kind of the discussion, because the buyer could always back out at any time. If there's no money that changes hands, say they don't do their inspections, they don't do anything that gives them skin in the game. There are states out there, California, Texas, have said they don't have a contract until money has changed hands. So if it terminates, they've argued at some point, and I don't know the exact cases or what they were arguing about, but they have said they didn't actually have a contract. So our legal minds in New Mexico have decided to put in something that's called independent consideration. We did have something for years called the TOM fee, but nobody ever used that. That was the time off market fee.
I used it. I've used it before.
Yeah, I used it a couple of times.
I think I have once.
Yeah,
but the
majority,
pretty
rare.
Yeah, the majority of people aren't using it. It's pretty much an option fee, and that's how they explained it to us. Like Texas has an option fee. If you're going to take your home off the market, I have given you money to have the option to do my due diligence. So during that due diligence period, we're saying earnest money does not count as consideration. So we've put this in an amount that can't be zero, but amount that goes from the buyer to the seller, and that's your consideration. That's what gives you a contract.
So just for our audience, just so I can kind of break down what you just said, consideration is money that you would put up. Correct me if I'm wrong. Money you would put up when you have an accepted contract with the seller. meeting of the minds. And when I say put up, you make it directly to the seller themselves, or I should say through some channel, right? Through a title company or however it goes, a direct check goes right to the seller. And that constitutes an agreement in the eyes of a court.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, some consideration, right, has been exchanged at that point because you have a meeting of the minds, and that makes it a valid contract. Is that at the crux of what a consideration fee is?
Absolutely. And we've given the options to say it can be applied to the purchase price if the deal closes. If it doesn't, it's not earnest money. It goes directly to the seller. So it's like a portion of earnest money that is non-refundable. You could consider it that too. But there just has to be something that the seller will get, regardless of wherever the earnest money goes. If the deal terminates, the seller gets this consideration.
Something for their time.
Yeah.
And consideration can come in any form, right? I could hand them a goat
Mhm.
and say, this is consideration.
We didn't say it's monetary. It's just it can't be nothing.
Can't be nothing.
I think the reason too that they're doing it, because I was like, well, then are our buyer broker agreements that we have to do, there's no consideration monies in those. And what kind of came of it was because the contracts for the purchase agreement favor the buyer so much, because it's very hard for a seller to back out, almost impossible. If the buyer wants to move forward, the seller can't really back out. That's why the consideration was added.
Well, and the length of those contracts as well. Buyer broker agreements usually a lot shorter. There's usually immediate consideration happening, which is a service being done, something like that. That's why I had the same exact question when we were going through it. It was the length of the contract is one of the main reasons that we're doing it in the purchase agreement.
Interesting, because my argument would be that consideration can come in any form, right? What about time?
I was about to say time is valuable.
Time is very valuable. You could say, in essence, we charge for our time. If we were to break it out in our compensation, people start scheduling home inspections. They're paying for an inspection, so none of that is considered consideration.
Well, we have the ability to charge for showings.
Mm-hmm.
We have the ability to charge for any of those things, and it's in the contract that says immediately upon, before the service, after the service.
Devil's advocate, the seller has the ability to counter an offer and ask for a TOM fee, a time off market fee.
Mm-hmm.
They have the ability to do that already.
Mm-hmm.
And also my rub with it is we say time and time again, we cannot tell the buyer and seller what they can put in the contract. It's their contract. It's their agreement. And now we're telling them they have to do this to have a contract.
It's being mandated, by our state forms.
That doesn't make any sense to me because we can't tell them to do anything in a contract.
I would agree with you on that point. But we can go down the rabbit hole there with some other things. Just for our audience, though, just to understand that so let's give a real world example, Paul. If I'm your buyer and you say, hey, this property's up for sale, I go look at it, say, Paul, I really want to make an offer on that, and it's a $300,000 property. What's your conversation look like with me in regard to earnest money and consideration?
Well, I would say that the earnest money conversation has never changed. That's money that you're putting up to show the seller that you are getting into this process in good faith. Call it skin in the game. I would say the independent.
Call it consideration, maybe?
Well,
it is.
I would say that consideration is a fee that you're paying to the seller for them to take their home off the market. So it's a time off market fee that we've actually just made mandatory. So you're asking, and other states call it the option fee. I pushed to call it an option fee. I even pushed for a contract fee. If we're saying that it has to be done to make a contract and money up front is the way to do that, then it is the time off market. But the way I would explain it is saying, hey, look, you have to give something to create this contract to allow them to give you time to do your due diligence.
But what's my earnest money then, Paul, if I'm the buyer?
Earnest money is something that you've put up as collateral that you could get back if you decide to terminate.
Within the lines of the contract.
Within the lines of the contract.
Exactly. But that's exactly what I'm To me, that's consideration. It's saying you'll operate within the lines of the contract, within the terms of the contract. And if you go outside of that, you lose that. To me, that is consideration because you're putting up sometimes thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes more to say, I'm serious about this purchase and I will move forward in good faith. And if I decide to back out because of one of these things, it's within my right to do so. I don't see the difference, to be frank.
I guess the arguments from the lawyers and the judges all the way up to district court have disagreed with us.
Yeah. And that's where, and I'm not putting you on the spot. We're
Right.
just kind of role playing here. It's going to be interesting conversations with buyers in the sense of, well, I'm putting up earnest money. Isn't that considered consideration? And why am I having to put up something that the seller just automatically gets no matter what? And then we're going to have to go into explaining that, look, this is more of an option fee. The fact that it validates that there is a contract in place is what the consideration does.
Well, and the reason that this is being done is because, just as you said earlier, there's so many times in the contract that says if the buyer decides to back out, they get their earnest money. It's baked into the contract. I don't remember how many times.
Heavily favored to the buyer.
When I first got in, it was 16 for the buyer and 4 for the seller. It's way more now when we've put everything to the buyer being able to back out. And it's got there's so many instances, so many contingencies, so many places where the buyer can back out and get their earnest money back, that at some point, when is the buyer actually tied to the contract? I mean, they go, well, I can just wait till this next contingency to this next contingency. The seller doesn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the argument for consideration to say, look, I am putting money in that the seller will get. And we've said it just can't be zero. It doesn't have to be an enormous sum.
I mean, give me $10. It'd be $1.
Yeah, I've already seen people complaining about, I got one for 10 cents. Well, negotiate. If that's not enough for the seller, negotiate.
Yeah. And the seller, rightfully so, can counteroffer with some of those contingencies, because you just went on about how the contingencies play out, and they are very heavily favored to the buyer. Like literally, you have as a buyer so many outs to be able to terminate that contract and technically receive your earnest money back within that time frame. But a seller can counteroffer. I mean, we were in an instance where we were buying the investment property in Colorado, and we had 6 figures worth of earnest money on the line, and the seller was like, "You have X till X date, period." And we had to play by the seller's rules in that regard. So the seller has every right to be able to do that, but it is heavily slanted to the buyer. And I think most contracts play out that way. So this consideration actually gives the seller a little bit more of, I don't know, what would you call it? Green grass? A little bit more of a consideration, I guess.
I think it's the buyer. The buyer is actually buying a contract.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that makes sense.
It's not the seller. The seller has, they're going to get all that money at the end. So the buyer, to create a contract for the buyer, they have to put in this.
I see. Because it's so heavily slanted toward the buyer, this forces them to put a little bit more consideration on the table. So to basically buy the contract in that regard, or buy some time, I guess, is the more appropriate way to say it, to vet what they're purchasing.
Hi, I'm Paul Berry, a partner at the Lyons Group. We're dedicated to making your real estate experience the best it can be. If you're looking to buy or sell, go to sjcbroker.com and watch our informational video series. These videos break down the process of buying and selling. While you're there, schedule a private consultation with one of our partners. We'd love to sit down and talk strategy and give you a real advantage in today's market. You deserve the best, so take those steps, and we'll see you soon. Now back to the show.
Shannon, what are your thoughts on the consideration and how it's about to play out?
I don't know. I don't know what I think about it. I don't like it, but I usually don't like change. I usually don't like big change like that. It's very uncomfortable for the buyer and the seller, and it's uncomfortable for us because they want to know what we think and what we're, how we should guide them to that. And I don't even think we know what to do on that yet. But I do agree. Buyers have had an upper hand for so long and sellers don't. And sellers only get, when we talk about ways for sellers to get out, honestly, the only ways for them to get out is if something else triggers it. Like a buyer just has a certain date to approve something or a certain date for things to happen. For the seller, the house either doesn't appraise. They can choose not to sell, but that has to happen.
Yeah.
The seller can't choose that. Or say we find termites and the seller chooses not to treat those and can kill the contract at that point. But that has to happen. So for the seller, their only options have to have triggers that have to go in their favor to be able to do that. So I do like the fact that sellers get a little bit more power, because when we talk about consideration for their time, you think about a seller, and we've all had this happen. You think about a seller that goes to market. I had this happen over on a little place behind the mall. Multiple offers. They take one of the offers. We get literally, a couple weeks in, and the buyer says, I don't want the house. He's still got a due diligence period. He gets his earnest money back. He walks away. My seller has already dropped several other contracts. So you go back to market again. Now you've kind of lost that fun, exciting, brand new, hot on the market timeframe. We went back on the market. We had another buyer that did the same thing, got all the way up to closing. I kept asking, what's the story here? Like, I haven't even had an appraiser has not entered this house. They knew they had some financing issues, so they wrote it out all the way to the end. Buyer didn't spend any money. Buyer didn't have a home inspection. Buyer didn't pay for an appraisal. Buyer didn't do anything. They just waited. And on the, 2 days before closing, when they couldn't get their qualification in line, they terminated. And they could do that because they had that in place.
Wow. So they played the game.
We go back a third time to the market. Again, luckily, we did find a buyer. We closed and everything was fine. But that kind of runaround for the sellers don't really have recourse. I mean,
in the middle of that, they can't just terminate. Like, I got a bad feeling about this.
Yeah,
buyer,
I'm not going to do that.
Deciding
now,
that
buyer can.
So I don't know if you guys have looked this hard in the purchase agreement, the new purchase agreement yet, but we fixed that very thing.
Yes, and I'm glad that now we have dates for appraisals and things like that, because
not only the appraisal, but the loan estimate. So in the contract, it used to say that you just do they have a prequal? And if not, you have so many days to get us a prequal. And then prequals really don't mean much. And then all the way up until 3 days, sometimes even 1 day before closing, you could get a denial letter. Buyer has the right to back out and get their earnest money back. So what we've said now is, do you have a prequel? You will make application within 3 days, or I think 3 days is the default day. 3 days from acceptance of the contract. So you have to get it over to the lender. Then from there, you have a certain number of days to get us proof of a loan estimate.
Because they have 3 days, lenders, to get them because of TRID, right?
Yep.
They have to get them within 3 days anyway. So there shouldn't be any reason
not to have those.
So
unless the buyer goes and buys a car and now they're not approved for the loan anymore.
Sure.
Yeah. So
which they should not get their earnest money back.
I'm like, in that case, I don't think you would get your earnest money back.
They do something that triggers it,
Exactly.
and they say, well, I have a loan denial letter. Yeah, but because of your behavior, that is not the seller's
I think you could argue
problem.
that.
yeah,
I think
you could definitely argue that. But what we've done is kind of take some of the rules in TRID and FERPTA and all of those types of things that, and we've put it into our contract so it actually makes sense. So we've kind of aligned the days, the 3 days from application. You have to have that loan estimate brought out, and then we can get proof of that. So what we've been trying to do, and one of the reasons I got on the forms committee, and I'm now chair of the forms committee, is to put some of the, give the sellers some rights, because I really think the sellers have no rights in these contracts.
This is where I go back, though, because most of the time, the seller is not the one spending the money in the contract. The buyer is the one that's paying for the appraisal. They're paying for the inspections. They're doing most of the things for the most part. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there are things that the seller pays for. Like, let's say the seller has paid for a septic inspection. Okay, well, they can use that again. They paid for a termite inspection. Okay, they can still use that. Unless they're doing some major renovations and repairs, then I could maybe see specific performance where they kind of force a buyer to move forward on it. But there really shouldn't be a ton of options for the seller, I think, to back out, because you have these buyers that are coming in and spending sometimes thousands of dollars, sometimes more, to purchase the property. And then a seller can just back out. Well, I don't love that.
Well, those are the ones that the buyers are actually trying to close on the house. A lot of times we get, and I had one that my people actually moved into your rental because the buyers needed more time. Come to find out, they were never qualified whatsoever. We got a stated income pre-qual letter, had no way of knowing it. And then finally, the lender just said, well, they were never qualified. They had to move back out of your rental back into their house.
Yeah.
So at some point, that loan estimate was never started. It was never issued because they never started the process.
But at what point is it on the people that are involved in the transaction? Like I don't care if I'm on the sell side, I'm talking to the lender
Correct.
throughout the whole process. How, and I'm not saying you or whatever, but I'm just saying like, at what point do you say, okay, I'll extend this time again, but earnest money's going hard now. Okay, I'll do, that, so it's like there are things that you can do. And I don't want to say that comes on to the realtor, but kind of, that's why it's important to have a good realtor in your corner to be like, no, I already talked to the lender, even though I'm on the sell side. No, I'm getting with them to do these things. Yes, repairs are doing this. There are things that we can already do in the contract to favor the seller. We just have to do them.
Yeah.
And honestly, the one that I'm talking about where, they never ordered the appraisal, clearly there was something going on. I reached out to that lender numerous times, and every time I just got yep, we're looking good. We're tracking just fine.
Yeah.
They never ordered.
They
never ordered the appraisal. They had to have known that they were working on something lending wise.
Yeah.
Well, they're always in the background trying to put somebody else on it.
That's
to get
right.
A co-signer.
That's right.
They don't want to lose the deal. They just want to get it.
And the problem is at the end of it, the buyer's made whole again. The buyer's given their earnest money back, and they're like, well, you had contingencies for that. You're good. You tried. Didn't work out. What did you have to lose? Absolutely nothing. But the seller does.
Yeah.
So it is a double-edged sword. I want to see the seller to have a little bit more rights in there, because I agree. Sellers shouldn't just have the right to just terminate. And I don't ever think that they should, but they should have more say along the way to say, look, I've given you these opportunities, and what do I get for it?
Yeah. Because even if you don't hit, like, let's say you don't order the appraisal by the time that you're supposed to as a buyer, well, you can still say, a seller would still have to do the 2-day motion notice to cure. Yeah. So it's like they still have 2 days to get that done. Yeah. And then one thing I don't love about our contracts, it just says they have to tell the lender in writing by this date to order the appraisal. It doesn't say that it has to be ordered that day.
Sure.
I think so in Colorado, we have an appraisal order deadline. Like that's the deadline. And not only that, the appraisal has to be done by a specific date. So the appraisal is done by this day. I would like to see that almost more than an order by or tell the lender to order by date.
I agree, because I want that contingency off the table too. I don't want
before
that to
you
be
start making repairs and things.
Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm glad you built those in and helped build that in, Paul, that there are some provisions in there for the seller. So they just can't be strung along, because we talk about money that is being outlaid by a buyer, but in this instance, it's opportunity cost, right? They may have had another property they wanted to buy, but couldn't get out of this contract because there was no triggers in there, even though you knew that something was going on behind the scenes. It wasn't right. But let's full circle back. We've got about 5 more minutes here to talk about consideration in particular and how it's separated from earnest money. So as a buyer, when you go to make an offer on a property here in New Mexico, now you are required, according to our state farm laws or regulations, that you have to give at least something greater than 0. It says it cannot be 0. And so I'm just curious how this will play out and your thoughts on how that's going to play out. Are you going to, if someone's going to put up $2,000 in earnest money, say, don't put up $2,000, let's put up $1,500 of earnest money and $500 consideration, because they have to be separate. What are your thoughts on that? Anyone want to chime in?
Depends how strong I want the offer to be. Is it been sitting for a long time and they just want an offer? Probably won't be very high.
Yeah. Are you competing?
Are you competing? I think might lean a little bit into that. But I would have already done that with the Tom fee. So it's kind of use it to how, I don't think there's going to be a one size fits all. And if it is, then that's not, I think you need to adjust your business model a little bit.
Yeah. So pay attention to the circumstances. I was having a conversation with another realtor just over the weekend about that. And she was asking questions about earnest money and consideration. And I said, it just really, in my opinion, depends on the situation. If it's a hot property and there's multiple offers, then I would probably lean into a little bit more of a consideration fee, because that is treated almost as hard earnest money, payable directly to the seller. And so, that gives them a big incentive to push your offer to the top.
I do like it where it can be applied to the purchase price versus a Tom fee is typically not applied to the purchase price. So I do like that. I think that's good. That was one of the
biggest conversations we had.
Yeah, I like that.
Because before it wasn't, and it was going to be directly to the seller at the outset. So it wasn't going to go through title. We were having a lot of trouble with the logistics of who's tracking and whatever. But one of the things that I wish we did was call it an option fee, because in all actuality, here's what it is. You are buying time to do your due diligence and then exercising your option to continue. And that's what it is. So you're paying whatever that is. How much are you willing to pay to do your due diligence to continue with the contract?
And it is different here. We have longer contract periods. Some places you're closing in under a week.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, a seller taking the property off market for under a week for the buyer to get their inspections, the title work, everything done, that's not as big of a risk as a month or two.
45 days, 60 days. Yeah.
It is different here.
So for our audience, they should consider this as an option to do some due diligence. Make sure this is the property that you want to move forward with, and this is the amount of money you're going to put up for that option. And while you're doing that, while you're putting that money up, it validates the contract that's on the table. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
Okay.
I think it'll be interesting to have this conversation again in a year from now when we've put it into motion in real life, worked through it, and decided how we feel about it and what works and what doesn't work and what's good advice to get and not. Because I think at this point, we don't know those things. But I think it's going to be a lot like the buyer brokerage agreements. When we first started them, no one was comfortable doing it. We didn't want to do them. We knew we had to. Now we're like, I love this buyer brokerage agreement. You this is really a lot of security for me. So it would be interesting, I think, for us to see this again in a year when we've all let it play out in real life a few times and we know what's good, what's bad, what we like, what we don't, and have that conversation again. And I think we would probably be coming to the table to the general public with a lot better information,
Yeah.
Well, and
Here's how we're using it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, here's the other thing.
This is what you should know.
If you've got to put up $500 consideration for a house, you won't get those people that are putting it in just going, I'm really just looking. And,
we're just going to try and see if we can make it work.
Throw this offer in there. I don't really know if I want to do that. Get rid of a lot of that type of stuff because now they have to put up.
That's right.
Up front. So I think that's one of the good things that'll happen. We could see a lot. 2025, the 40% fall through rate across the country. That was the number, right? Am I wrong on that one?
I
think you were
right. It was
right.
pretty high. Yeah.
So if
it was ridiculous.
If we could, stop the looky-loos or the people that aren't 100% sure they want to buy a house, because I tell people all the time, we've had this conversation too. I said, if you think that you're going to get into this deal and they're going to replace that roof, let's rethink this. Something like this could stop a lot of those fall throughs.
Yeah, because you do have those people that say, we'll negotiate, we'll try to, get what we can now, and then we'll wait for the home inspection to ask for all the things that we know we want them to do right now.
Yeah. Or we know the appraisal is going to come in low.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. Well, Mr. Considerate has already put it on the docket for a year from now, Shannon.
Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting to see when we know how it plays out to have the conversation, because I think we will be a wealth of knowledge for the public and be able to.
Horror stories of this.
They'll be good and they'll be bad.
Yeah. Well,
we're learning too.
And, New Mexico is very proactive with our forms, almost too proactive with our forms. We create solutions before there's any real problems in a lot of instances. And it's disruptive to the industry. And this is a disruption. Not saying it could be a bad disruption. It could be a good disruption. But it is certainly a disruption. That is for certain. And we're going to see how we navigate it. Great conversation about consideration. And for our audience, you're hearing directly from those on the front lines, those that have a lot of say on how these rules and regulations on the state level come down. And you're seeing right here, right now, how we are working our way through it as realtors as well. So hopefully you're gleaning some information that we don't know all the answers. We're just going to play the game by the rules and see what happens, see how the chips fall. So great discussion. Thank you for that. If you like our content, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, you can go to our Facebook page. We've got all kinds of great content there, a newsletter that goes out, and of course, all kinds of great memes that Shannon posts weekly.
I'm funny too.
You are funny.
Sometimes.
I do.
The funniest head of the HOA there ever has been.
Right? I'm the funniest Karen you will ever meet.
Oh my gosh, I love it. But thank you for listening to this episode of The Den. And you can always go to sjcbroker.com and schedule a private consultation with anyone here at the Lyons Group. We'd love to sit down with you, whether you're buying or selling residential or commercial property. we can give you an advantage in today's market. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Den. Until next time, we'll see you then. Thanks for tuning into The Den, powered by the Lyons Group. If you got value from today's episode, hit subscribe so you never miss what's next. Check the show notes with direct links to our buyer and seller video series, your inside track to making smarter moves in real estate. Want to take it further? Visit sjcbroker.com to learn more about the Lyons Group or schedule a private consultation today. Complex markets demand smart strategies. Whether you're buying or selling, residential or commercial, we're here to give you the edge. We're time-tested experts with a client-first approach, and we'll see you next time in The Den.